these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal.
As a member of Congress, I get to have a lot of really interesting people in the office. Experts on what they're talking about.
This is the podcast
For insights into the issues.
China, bioterrorism, Medicare for all. In-depth discussions.
Breaking it down into simple terms. We hold
these truths.
with Dan Crenshaw.
The Eagle has landed.
Hey, welcome back, folks. This is going to be one of the most boring episodes you've ever had to listen to because we have Mike Gallagher as our guest. I'm just kidding. Mike is my friend. It's actually going to be really great. Mike is a fellow representative from Wisconsin. He's also a big nerd. He went to Princeton. I'm just wrecking you. I'm sorry. I love you.
My goal is to be the most boring member of Congress.
You're not, though.
Yeah.
One of the smartest, actually. Didn't go to Princeton.
It's a low bar. Very low bar.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you went to Princeton. You had the National Intelligence University. I didn't even know you have a PhD from Georgetown.
Yeah, they're giving them away these days.
So
yeah.
Regardless, I mean, it's not nothing. You're a professor. You were like doing it. You were doing like professor work before you came to Congress.
I think it's more accurate to say I was an aspiring but failed academic, and that Georgetown took pity on me because I was still on active duty when I was doing most of the program. And
yep, you were a Marine.
Decided to get rid of me by giving me the PhD so that I wouldn't bother them anymore. But I'm just excited to be here, Dan, to be
the greatest podcast ever.
And talking with the man who shot bin Laden. And what's that like?
About that, but obviously
can I get some details? How many books do you get to write if you shot bin Laden? What is that? Yeah, what's that like?
Well, there's like 2 major books written, I think. That would have been fun. So I would remember where I was when bin Laden was shot, and unfortunately, it was not in the place that bin Laden was shot, which is Pakistan.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about, what I want to have you here today to talk about, because like you were deployed to Iraq, you were in the Marine Corps as an intel officer. You've been representing Wisconsin's 8th district since 2016, and foreign affairs, national security have been in your wheelhouse. And I recently posted one of your videos because it was hilarious, but also very informative. Look, guys, I'm telling you, there's a lot, people ask me all the time. They're like, how come the rest of the Republicans don't do stuff like you do stuff, Dan? And I'm like, well, they actually do. You just don't follow them.
Yeah.
And maybe you should follow them. And Mike is one of those. You put out some really good stuff.
Well, can I confess? I very much struggle with this because I constantly debate the value of like time put into social media. And I recognize that it's just sort of the price of doing business in the modern Congress, but it's not necessarily conducive to, I think, at times like a sane conversation with your constituents. I think long form discussions like this are actually far more valuable. I mean, but
even this, a lot of members do podcasts, but it's honestly not worth your time if the audience just isn't growing.
Well, I think for you, I mean, you have such a big following, and it happened.
So many people love this podcast.
So many people love this podcast.
You have no idea. The most people love this podcast, Mike. The most people.
Where are you in the
most beautiful podcast
system?
Probably number 1, like all the time. I mean, obviously. People are giving it 5 stars right now. People are pausing the podcast right now to give it 5 stars.
That's got to be true. But I know I just feel, so there's an interesting, I wonder if you feel this pressure. I just feel like everyone in Congress now is trying to be like a social media content creator. And like, that's not necessarily the same thing as being a legislator. And I don't know if they're mutually exclusive, but I find myself going in the opposite direction of, okay, how do I pay less attention to social media while still like effectively communicating with my constituents? And I've been here 5 years and I've never figured it out.
You got to do a little bit of both. Paul Ryan and I had this discussion. Like, he divides people up here into legislators and performers. And look, the truth is you have to have a foot in each category.
Yeah.
To effectively communicate, because whether we like it or not, America's a giant reality TV show, and people want to be entertained to an extent. And that's easy to do because it's easy in the conservative side to just sort of list the slogans that we know work, like "lock her up." People are like, "Oh, I love it." And it's it just works, right? But also It's like there's not like okay, and then the more serious conservatives are like, well, it's like due process, and there's these other like sort of like long held values, but it gets the people going, and so you got to get the people going, but you've also owed them a more intellectual discussion. So like you can't, I can't claim that I'm not a performer, right? I jump out of airplanes and campaign videos, like obviously. I've done that stuff because it's fun, but then you owe people a serious discussion. Like you're bringing them in with the entertainment, but then you owe them a serious discussion. That's kind of what she did. I don't know. I don't know if it was that entertaining, but the video I was talking about, to go back to it, was a deep dive into the truth behind Fauci's claims that there was no gain of function research. And you just you opened up like 3 whiteboards on this thing, and you looked like Charlie Day from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It was like, and like you even had like the crazy professor, your shirt, your sleeves rolled up, and like your collar like undone. Yeah, it was good. Well, it was good stuff, but it was also very informative. You want to go into that?
Yeah, sure.
Like because it's still on people's minds.
Yeah.
I mean, look, again, this is the difference between like, lock him up, and just like, look, let's actually look at what happened here. Yeah. I'm not sure he committed a crime per se, but I don't trust him. Yeah. So tell us why we should.
Okay. So, and this came up again last week because there was a very intense back and forth between
him and Rand. Do you think him and Rand Paul are secretly buddies?
Maybe they're manufacturing.
They're just like,
it's good for both of them, like both their audiences. Yeah, exactly. No, I doubt it. I doubt they're on each other's Christmas
list. They actually hate each other.
By the way, the listeners, the millions of listeners should know that we're drinking some of Dan's whiskey. The last time I drank whiskey on a podcast, it did not end well. Hashtag Jonah Goldberg.
What happened?
It was a very entertaining podcast. We talked about half-baked ideas. I think it's fair to say, you can notice the difference between the start of the podcast.
Is it going to sink your political career?
That's already sunk. Although I feel like I graduated college in 2006. I feel like I was the last person on the helicopter out of Saigon in terms of social media, like nothing. And I got off Facebook after 2 years on it. So like that period of my life is not cataloged at all. Whereas now I just feel like the next generation is screwed in terms of every aspect of their life is documented, and it's going to come up in job interviews.
That's true. No, I feel we're the same age. So that's about, I don't know.
But I feel so much younger than you.
Do you though?
Yeah.
Because I have more hair.
Interesting.
So.
That's how you.
You just called me a bastard on my own podcast.
Is that what? Did we just script your rating? Yeah. It's a sensitive subject.
How old are you?
I'm 37.
We're the exact same age.
Look at that. When's your birthday? Are we allowed to say that?
March 14th.
March 3rd.
I raise money on my birthday, so I suppose
March
people
3rd.
know it.
How have we not had a joint birthday party? Dan?
Yeah. So you are older.
That's true. This is a crushing realization. I was the second youngest when I came in 2016 behind Elise.
Does anybody have does anybody share your birthday that's famous?
Good question. I don't know. I know that Shaquille O'Neal's birthday is March 6th.
So it's not your birthday.
But I know that because I used to celebrate it as a child.
Again, not your birthday. Okay.
Not my birthday, but I do still love Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal.
Doesn't matter. It's not your birthday. So on my who cares? You've answered the question. So my birthday, who shares it? Albert Einstein.
Very generous host.
Albert Einstein. That's why I'm so smart. It's also Pi Day.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's true.
Albert Einstein shares your birthday. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's great. What's Pi Day?
What's Pi Day?
Like as in the number or the
the
dessert?
Number. Yeah, the number.
Wow.
Because 314.
Oh, perfect. Look at that. Mm-hmm. That's very exciting. Mm-hmm. We'll have to celebrate Pi Day. Okay, Fauci.
People want to know.
I think what's getting lost in, and I actually think Rand Paul is right and Fauci is wrong. And it's not just me as a conservative saying that.
There's a lot of evidence here.
Josh Rogan, center left, fair to say, Washington Post reporter who's been all over this, said that exact same thing after the exchange. The fact is, as a matter of public record, what do we know? We know that grants from NIAID, Fauci's organization, went to the EcoHealth Alliance. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just NIAID, it was the United States Agency for International Development, There were DoD funds from DARPA and DITRA that went to these nonprofits. In particular, there was one nonprofit, the EcoHealth Alliance, run by Dr. Peter Daszak, who we know was doing cooperative, this is a matter of public record, it's indisputable, collaborative research with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And we now know, based on, and this is what Senator Paul was citing in the back and forth, published research papers, they were doing experiments on these viruses designed to make them more pathogenic,
and that's
more
for
infectious.
definitional purposes. That's what gain of function means.
That is, as Dr. Richard Ebright from Rutgers has said, the essence of the definition of gain of function. So I think Fauci is hiding behind a highly legalistic interpretation, and his organization wrote basically exemption. Remember, there was a moratorium on gain of function research.
Yes.
Because Fauci back in 2011, 2012 has op-eds that he wrote saying that, of course this is risky, and he has a speech in 2012 that's amazing in terms of, he basically lays out all the potential things that could go wrong with this, including accidentally causing a global pandemic from a lab leak. So this was very controversial within the scientific community. In the Obama administration in 2014, they imposed a moratorium. They said, we're not going to do gain of function research. But there was essentially a review process set up, and they set it up in a way where the definition is very opaque, and funds continued to flow to these third-party organizations. So hundreds of millions of dollars went to EcoHealth. EcoHealth was doing cooperative research with the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and they were taking naturally occurring coronaviruses and they were doing experiments on them. This is like the Jurassic Park problem, right? Like life finds a way. And so
It becomes a super virus.
you would think, and again, we don't know that it came from a lab. I happen to think that most of the evidence is stacking up in favor of the lab leak hypothesis, but we don't have a smoking gun. But notably, those who are arguing for the zoonotic origin, i.e. that it came naturally occurring from an animal or an intermediate species like a pangolin. By the way, I didn't even know what a freaking pangolin was 2 years ago.
What is a pangolin?
It's like a weird-looking animal. Interestingly enough, someone in my congressional art competition drew a picture of a pangolin, almost won, came in second place.
But what does it look like?
It looks sort of like a
kangaroo penguin? That's what I'm imagining.
No, it looks like sort of like a ferret mixed with an armadillo is sort of how I would best
So
describe
it's armored?
it. Yeah, it's up armored.
Yeah.
It's an up armored pangolin.
All right, we're getting off track here.
Yeah.
So it's important to know. Also, doctors I've talked to say you really don't need gain of function research because of modern algorithms and modeling techniques. I mean, it's just unnecessary. So what they did was there. Do you think there was intent at NIH to fund it, but just fund it in a roundabout way that offers them deniability?
Well, so if I step back one layer, I should say the intent behind the gain of function research, I don't think is an evil one, right? The whole idea is that by experimenting on these natural viruses, you're trying to get ahead of the next pandemic.
But in modern times, that people have assessed that the risk reward just isn't there.
Totally, right? I mean, you're meddling with the primal forces.
One of the
of
reasons
nature.
is the ones I just stated. You have modeling techniques that can sort of allow you to do the same job without creating a super virus.
And we've learned that lab leaks are actually more common than we thought, right? Yeah. And it's not just in Wuhan,
especially if
China.
There's pangolins running around the lab. Is that what you're saying? There's pangolins running around the Wuhan lab?
A couple of pangolins hopped up on Texas whiskey. You don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
At that point.
Well, you do.
Global
pandemic.
Global pandemic. Here's what I think is the most plausible hypothesis. Fauci and sort of the network of scientists that Fauci awarded funds to, because Fauci is the godfather of gain of function research, had so much of their professional reputation invested in gain of function research, right? And they thought that they were saving the world by doing it, right? That it is so hard for them to admit that it went wrong. And I think the bias during the moratorium was, yes, we need to continue to make progress on this type of research. So we're gonna get close to the line. Maybe we'll jump over it. We're gonna obscure where the line begins and ends. That's what I think happened. But it is undeniable that hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money
went to gain of function research.
Went to gain of function research and cooperative research with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And we now know, thanks to what the outgoing Trump administration declassified, that as early as 2017, we had U.S. diplomats flag security concerns with the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yeah. that there were possible military dimensions of that program, or at least there were Chinese military officials that had access to the lab, if not overall control of the lab. We know that there were lab workers at the Wuhan Institute that got sick potentially as early as October. We know that there was a massive gathering of international athletes. The World Military Games was held in Wuhan in early October, and that there were athletes from multiple countries that came down with flu-like symptoms. And so I've asked the Pentagon to release all the records we have from the roughly 200 American athletes that were there. Mm-hmm. It seems obvious to me that we would want to know if they got sick, were they tested, did they have antibodies? And again, I'm not trying to go out there and score points by bashing Fauci. I just don't want there to be another global pandemic that totally upends our way of life. And so understanding how this one started and when it started is step one in trying to avoid and prevent the next pandemic. But Fauci, here's the thing I'd say. And I didn't start off in this position with Fauci.
I don't think any of us did.
Totally. He seems so arrogant right now. Like in that exchange with Rand Paul, he's attacking, he's on offense. He doesn't express an iota of humility.
Or just explain it. Like give us your version of it. You know, the only plausible explanation that Fauci could give is explaining how it's impossible for NIH to know that if money goes to EcoHealth Alliance, there's no way they could possibly know what happens to that money after that. Totally. That would be and you'd have to prove that to us. Totally. That would be a very simple explanation, but he doesn't do that. He just screams at Rand Paul.
Yeah, so just say okay, we were funding Ebright's organization because Ebright was in the business of going around and collecting all these viruses. We did not intend to fund the gain-of-function research. We did not have perfect visibility into everything that was happening at the lab. Here's how we interpreted the definition. Here's how you're interpreting it. It doesn't have to be a...
Right. Yeah. And then it would kind of be forgotten about because I don't think anybody thinks the NIH wanted there to be a global pandemic.
Of course not.
You know, so I'm not even sure the Wuhan Institute wanted that. So I'm not even, I think the Chinese government tried to cover it up. I don't think they wanted this to happen. Just seems like a bad policy on a lot of fronts. But, so I don't understand the defensiveness from Fauci.
I don't understand it at all. It's gone from just defensiveness to arrogance. And it's actually... so the administration still has him out there on the Sunday shows every week as sort of the lead messenger on everything related to coronavirus. But I think he's lost the public's trust. And this is part of the reason why.
So many public health officials have. And it's because of, you watch the news all day today. And as they try to make the case that children are at risk, this is the top 10 killer of children. But it's like, a child has a much higher chance of dying from the flu than COVID. That remains true. It's always been true. So when you say things like that without any context, without the actual facts, you're trying to scare people deliberately and unnecessarily. We don't wear masks for the flu. Again, children are at more risk from the flu just by the data than COVID. Yeah. And yet this is the line that they're using now. Now we want to have people wear masks because even if they're vaccinated. This is nonsense.
Well, Fauci was I think he was on Tapper's show on Sunday. Someone sent this to me, and I forget the exact way Tapper worded the question, but he said, given, what we know about the lab, does this make you hesitant about doing this type of work with them going forward? And Fauci basically said, we've always been careful and we'll continue to be careful. I'm sorry, but that's not a freaking acceptable answer.
And why does the Chinese need our money anyway? I guess that's just for a broader policy discussion. Maybe they don't need it. I suppose we invest in labs around the world so that we gain access to their data. Perhaps. I don't know what the point is of funding this otherwise.
Yeah, what's interesting about this is the plan on the table, and this is where Josh Rogan has really unearthed a lot of this, is to increase. We have this whole program that's geared towards all these cooperative relationships with these labs. And again, the intent is a noble one. I'm not suggesting anyone's out there trying to actively cause a pandemic. We're going to get ahead of the next pandemic. They're actively trying to push a 6x increase in the funding for this program called the PREDICT program, where we're going to increase the amount of money that we spend to do cooperative research. And I think it's a bad idea because I do think if indeed it's determined, as most of the evidence suggests, that this leaked from a lab and that we were funding gain-of-function research at the lab, the first thing you would do is to stop doing that, right? Let's not do more gain-of-function research, particularly in sketchy Chinese labs that are controlled by a genocidal communist regime that does not give one crap about the welfare of the Western world at all. So sorry to sound crazy on your otherwise sane podcast,
Super
Dan,
sane.
Can I say one other thing about this before we move on to your list of issues? And by the way, I should note I'm staring at a very handsome portrait of Dan Crenshaw on the cover of his book Fortitude, available in bookstores everywhere. If books are still sold, if they haven't been shadow burned off Amazon at this point, looks very good. I may not read your book, Dan, but I'll stare at the cover.
Because you got a signed copy. Read for the audience what I signed it.
Okay.
You don't have to.
Dan.
You can just read it. You could give whatever version you want.
Mike, hopefully this book helps you be stronger. Finally. Dan Crenshaw. Semper, and then like way down the page, Semper Fi with an exclamation point.
Give you a little shout out.
Build, like break me down, build me back up at the end. Appreciate that. Okay, final point on Wuhan, and then we can move on to your things. So in April, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this. In April, early April of 2020. So that we're in the throes of the pandemic at that point. Everything's shut down. The intelligence community, led by the DNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, releases a statement, a short paragraph statement. It's very odd. It's very rare for the DNI to release like public statements like this. And it says, and I'm paraphrasing, the intelligence community agrees with the strong scientific consensus that this was a naturally occurring virus and not, man-made or genetically modified. So effectively, the DNI and the entire intelligence community, the Trump intelligence community, by the way, weighs in favor of Fauci and all the quote-unquote experts who were pushing this narrative. That all started with this letter that was organized in this medical journal, The Lancet, or scientific journal, The Lancet, which was organized, which we now know thanks to FOIA documents, Fauci's communications confirm this, by Richard Ebright, who was the head of the EcoHealth Alliance, who has the biggest conflict of interest in the world. The one guy who is sort of the leading proponent of gain-of-function research, who had built his entire professional career, organized a letter in this otherwise reputable scientific journal that said, this didn't come from a lab, it was naturally occurring, and anyone who suggests it came from a lab, like Tom Cotton, like Dan Crenshaw, is a crazy tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. And then our own intelligence community weighs in on their behalf. What the hell happened with that? I want to know. Like, did they outsource their analysis to these scientists that they just uncritically accepted their worldview? That's unacceptable from the intelligence community. And I come from the intelligence community. Like, my bias is with like the hardworking people there. And this is a crazy failure. And I think, if confirmed, the biggest intelligence failure since 9/11.
That's a pretty big deal, what you just laid out there. And people should probably just maybe rewind a couple minutes if you want to hear it again. I think it's a very important point. The fact that letter, that analysis was created by EcoHealth Alliance, who we'd been funneling this money to. They are the ones who funded gain-of-function research directly to Wuhan so that Fauci could say we didn't do it directly. And then they get the bureaucrats in DC to basically come together and all agree. I guess that's what bureaucrats do. Bureaucrats love broad consensus. Yeah. So if you're trying to understand psychologically, like, how could this happen? Well, yeah, I think a lot of people at DNI don't understand the science of it, and they defer to experts, right? There's everybody goes to the same master's programs. He needs a refill. Needs a refill. They have it out there. They go to the same experts. They graduate from the same schools, right? The same schools you went to.
All these evil
Georgetown,
Ivy League. Yeah,
Harvard. Jeez,
I didn't go to Harvard. You went to Harvard.
I would never go to Harvard.
Is that a 2-year or 4-year? I've never heard of it.
1 year.
Yeah,
I didn't exactly get my PhD. I didn't. It is a master's program. Anyway, don't worry about that. That's not the point.
This is an important point, though. This is a very important point because I think there's a great. I've said this before. After the Bay of Pigs fiasco in the early '60s, Kennedy has this great quote where he says, you always assume, when it comes to the minimum wage, I have no problem overruling somebody or telling them that they're wrong because I know the issue. But when it comes, when you're dealing with the generals and you're dealing with defense issues, you always assume that the military generals have, information that's not available to ordinary mortals. Yeah. And I still think that effect holds true, and why it's important to have veterans in Congress, because I do think that if someone comes from the intelligence community or someone comes from the Pentagon and they got a bunch of stars on their shoulder, there's a tendency, particularly among sort of members of Congress that haven't served, to just uncritically accept everything they say. And the intelligence community, I say this as a human intelligence officer, like, it's subject to the same flaws and biases that all human beings are. We used to say the problem with human intelligence is that it involves humans. And there were severe limits to our ability to collect in China. It's a very difficult collection target. Yeah. And I think it's fair to say we weren't focusing a lot of our collection priorities on labs in Wuhan.
And let's be honest, I think that just for some reason, bureaucrats in the so-called deep state, I don't like that term, but it is kind of a real thing.
You could call it at least an administrative state. That's what it is.
100%
the executive branch has grown.
But when people are talking about the deep state, sometimes it gets a little conspiratorial. I don't think it's like this organized deep state. What it is it's a collective of people who come from the same worldview and have a very severe reaction to how Donald Trump talks, right? Because he sounds wrong even when he's right. Like that's sort of. I love the guy, but let's just be honest. And it's like, man, he was right a lot, but he sounded so wrong every time he talked about it. It's like even, like the UV light in the veins thing. That sounds crazy, but it's actually real. Like that's a real scientific procedure. Like it's totally real,
Or during the whole hydroxychloroquine fiasco. I mean, my family's all physicians. I'm the only non-physician, and they were like, "Yeah, we've been prescribing this for years and years.
Super
and
safe.
Years.
You and I have taken it overseas, probably. For malaria or something.
I guess the jury's out on whether it's like the most effective COVID treatment,
right?
But it's
not dangerous, so try it. My God, why was this such a thing?
Totally.
The scientific community has severely lost credibility. The public, let's call it the public health community. Because science means a lot of things, right? I still think theoretical physics has some awesome places to go. Okay, that's a totally different podcast. But
space lasers and what we're talking about here.
Well, I mean, look, the debate over whether we are in a multi-world universe.
Oh, interesting.
Right. And very mainstream physicists believe that there's just an infinite number of universes. Now, why is that? Well, it's because of the Schrodinger equation and the probability collapse of a particle.
Yeah.
So you never know where it is until you measure it. Okay, for a given particle. That's just a fact of particle physics. It's a fact of quantum physics. And so the question is, what happens to the other half of the probability? I'm not describing this perfectly, but I'm basically getting it right. And the answer is it splits.
Interesting.
The answer is it splits, and so you have an infinite number of universes. I don't like that theory a whole lot. It doesn't sit right with me, but I'm not really smart enough to debunk it.
I just read this
string theory. String theory would be, I think, the other version of this. Basically like a holographic universe. There's sort of like an underlying energy field, and then our reality is projected in sort of a 3D image from that 2D reality.
I thought I was supposed to be the nerd, and I have an irresistible urge to stuff you into lock.
I minored in.
Give you a swirly right now, Dan.
Irresistible urge.
I just read this sci-fi book that I liked a lot called Dark Matter, which is all about this, about sort of infinite universes. And then this author, I think it's Blake Crouch, maybe I'm getting that wrong. He just wrote another one called Recursion, which is not necessarily about time travel, but it's time travel-ish. I like to read sci-fi, Dan. That's
you just talked about stuffing me in a locker, and you're like, wow, I just got my sci-fi books. All right,
it's true. But I already fooled my wife into marrying me, so I don't need to pretend anymore. It's all the veil's coming off.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it was a big accomplishment on my part. Yeah, it's great.
Your first date.
Yeah.
All right. What were we talking about?
We talked about Fauci, Wuhan.
Yeah.
Look, can I make a final point on this?
Oh yeah. And
okay.
then we're gonna get to kind of just broader Chinese, how we should think about China and some other stuff.
Well, that was gonna be my final point. So I'll say,
sure. Let's transition.
You made
to
a comment
then.
about science, and I do think the public health community has suffered as a result of this crisis. Although I think the general public, and maybe this gets to the themes in your book. I mean, Like, I don't think the government's role in our life is to like remove all risk from our lives. Like,
Yeah, well, this is a key philosophical difference between and a key reason why we've had so much disagreement on the COVID response.
yeah,
That-
and like the essence of science, in my opinion, as like a fake political scientist, is not like to generate consensus, but rather to challenge it. Right? It's the whole scientific method is you develop a working hypothesis and then you actively try and you disconfirm it. You try to disprove your own hypothesis.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the way in this pandemic, we did the opposite, where it was like, science means you have to subscribe to a certain set of beliefs, and then to question
and then
it means
silence other stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, it was ridiculous. Yeah, because I mean, consensus is built eventually, but only after, like, the world is round.
Yeah.
Like, it just is, and that consensus was built over time.
Yeah.
As let's call it like the arrows from the flanks of trying to disprove that consensus kept failing.
Yeah. But that's a great example. Not that Earth is round, but
You don't believe the Earth is round, do you?
I do. The basic idea of like heliocentricity, that the Earth goes around the sun, was considered heretical at one point. So there's this great like vignette about Galileo, who obviously challenged that, and then the church authorities came to arrest him from his house, and they're like taking him out of his house, and who knows if this is apocryphal or real, but he has this quote, and I don't speak the language, but he says, "Apure si mueve." He says, so he's getting like taken to prison as a result of believing this, and he's like, and yet it moves. He's like, it's still true that it moves, and he was willing to challenge the scientific orthodoxy at the time, which was really a religious orthodoxy, which is what I think we're confronting today, right? Which is a religious movement.
It's Fauciism.
Yeah, Fauci has become a demigod that cannot be challenged.
I think National Review had like a cover of him with like a halo around his head. I mean, let's just be honest. It's what it is. The climate change debate's the exact same thing. It's a religion.
But that's like, it's got to be a proxy for something bigger that I don't fully understand. Like why would the left?
I'm not sure
be
they
so-
understand their intentions on this. I do think it ends up in control and collectivism. But again, the question still is why. Like, why do you love that idea so much? Why do you love that control? Why do you want everybody doing the same thing and singing the same tune so badly? Why does that make you so happy? And it's funny coming from the people who express such love of diversity and even want more diversity in any institution just for the sake of diversity. Of course, what they mean is more of like a color of skin diversity. They think all the people of different colored skin and ethnicity should also say the same things and sing from the same hymnal.
Yeah.
So, superficial diversity, so to speak, but it's weird. And I'm not sure they know why.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think in my estimation and analysis of the left, it's they moralize and they analyze life through one lens and one lens only, which is their sense of compassion and caring.
Yeah.
And this kind of makes them pathological and unable to engage in any kind of conscientiousness, problem solving, just fact finding. They don't engage in that linear logic that you would need to engage in to come to certain conclusions.
You see this in the mask debate, right? And I say this as someone like in the pandemic, my basic view was, hey, like, let's wear a mask. It's imperfect, but if that's what I have to do so that my local, restaurant can stay open, I'm more than happy to do it, right? Like, masks are imperfect. Just watch a freaking
There's like a healthy medium
football
with
game.
masks.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Just like use your best.
But post-vaccine, though, I don't know.
What's the problem? Now they want to remask.
Yeah, this is a problem.
So why the hell did I get the vaccine if I got to go back to wearing masks?
This is hugely detrimental for vaccine hesitancy. And because now it's like, wait, now I have really no point in getting a vaccine if I still have to wear a mask.
And I don't know if this is the same in your district. And my district used to sort of be a swing district. Now it's a little bit more Republican, but I still think it's true of just your middle of the road person in Northeast Wisconsin. I just think we've reached a point where it's just naive to think that we're going to go back to shutdowns and masks, particularly for kids. No,
we're done. We're done. We're having massive events. Everybody's in baseball games and stadiums. Like we're just not there, and like, if there's vaccine hesitancy, I just heard this stat on the news, so I'm going to repeat it. Don't hold me to it, but 2/3 of the people unvaccinated are in the Latino and Black populations. So who's messaging to them? Let's be honest. It's Democrats.
Interesting.
And who was creating distrust in the vaccine early on? It was Democrats. Right,
Kamala Harris.
I was blowing up.
Among them?
I was blowing up Governor Cuomo today because Chris Cuomo decides to like mention me on his show yesterday, like I'm this like anti-vaxxer, and I'm like, whoa, you know, get your facts straight, buddy. He's like freedom, whatever, you know. That was basically his monologue. I posted it on my social media, and I was like, so I've always said this, that you should take the vaccine, but you know who hasn't? Your brother. Governor Cuomo, who was like, you should, he literally is quoted, you know, in October, like saying you shouldn't trust it. You know, this just wouldn't trust this FDA. That's what he said.
Yeah.
So like they set the stage for this early on. They politicized it early on, and they're trying to gaslight the American people and make it, you know, and say Republican. Now, obviously there's a lot of Republicans who are clearly skeptical of it. Look, you know, it is what it is. Like, the thing about government and the thing about the philosophy of government is you just have to accept that as a governing body, you can only do so much, and you should only do so much.
Yeah.
That is life. And they hate that idea.
Yeah.
That's where Fauciism comes from, because Fauciism is all about you do the thing that the experts said to do.
Yeah.
And you do it, you rube. You just have to.
I think I reached my breaking point and I was all in on, we got to sacrifice 15 days
For
to slow
2
the
weeks.
spread.
2
Yeah,
weeks
exactly.
2 weeks. I was pissed about 2 weeks.
Well, yeah. I wrote an op-ed.
But I didn't fight it. You know,
Yeah.
it was 2 weeks.
I wrote an op-ed in
After that, no.
April 2020 where I said, okay, hey, the shutdown, we had to do it, but it's not a sustainable strategy. Here's what we got to do going forward, whatever. But then when Thanksgiving came, and you had Fauci out there saying, like, people can't gather together in Thanksgiving. Like, okay, I'm sorry. The government really has no role in telling you, like, who
This was the start of my big 4th of July party, by the way, because President Biden was like, well, if you're lucky, you can have some people in your backyard outsed for 4th of July. And I was like, I'm going to have a giant party now.
Yeah.
So,
well, this gets to your issue.
Nobody got COVID.
You want to transition to, not that you know about, super spreader, hashtag. This is the difference between China and America. And like, we're not going to beat China by out China-ing China. Like, China was welding people into their apartments early on in COVID. Like, China's ability to lock down a society is always going to be better than ours. Like, we naively, like, America can do a 15-day shutdown to slow the spread. I think you can appeal to the patriotic impulses.
People just rebel. I mean, like,
maybe
after
you
that,
stretch it to a month, like maybe at best,
Yeah.
but like, this is a nation of, you know, frontiers people and risk takers, and Texas knows that better than anyone.
Also, it's never worked anywhere in the world. It hasn't worked anywhere in the world. There's other countries, like, still, I think Singapore's relocking down.
Yeah.
You know, all these countries that have been hailed as like getting it under control because they were responsible.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's a pandemic and it's global.
People always do this with Singapore, and I admire a lot of Singapore's. You know, they have interesting healthcare systems. And
It's like 5 people who are all bazillionaires
it's a giant
who live in a
city
tiny
state.
little city.
It's not America, right? You
Yeah.
have to filter the ideal through what's possible in America, right? And I think the American people are willing to sacrifice a lot, but when I just think the school issue is where it came to a head with a lot of parents in my district. I mean, digital learning may help a little bit with high school kids, but for middle school, for young kids,
it's a disaster.
It's worthless.
And then they finally get to school and they're forced to wear these masks on their face, and it's like,
Totally.
And again, the science says you are more at risk from the flu.
Yeah.
You know, this is it's mind blowing. Okay, let's get to China. Tell us how to solve the China problem. Is this the greatest foreign policy threat facing America over the next 50 years?
I think so. And I say this as someone, I spent the first 15 years of my career as a Middle East specialist and an Arabic linguist, convinced that the Middle East would be like the main. And I'd be curious if you had a
big proponent for endless wars.
Just like, the only problem with these wars is that they end at some point. Yeah, keep them going. And this was sort of like my biggest area where I had to revisit my priors and had the help of a lot of good friends. A guy I served with, he's in the same specialty as me, Matt Pottinger. He was a deputy national security advisor, Mandarin linguist, China guy, super smart guy. And I met him in Iraq in 2007. You know, we've had this debate going on, and he was right, I was wrong on the whole thing. I do think it's sort of the only existential threat we face. Now, you can make an argument that Russia presents an existential threat because of its nuclear weapons, but like as an ideological matter, like I think what's so dangerous about the Chinese Communist Party is they're trying to not just like destroy us militarily, and they are trying to do that in the region. They're trying to sort of discredit the entire sort of American model, and in so doing, discredit the entire free world, and show that their model is superior. And they've gone to school on the failures of the Soviet Union and learned a lot of lessons from that, and feel like they have sort of figured out the code. They're leveraging technology. They're far more economically powerful than the Soviet Union ever was, and so for that reason, and many others, I think China is going to be the sort of overarching threat of the next 50 years. I think we're in the early stages of a new Cold War. It's different from the old Cold War. It has some similarities, but notable differences that we can get into. I think the most critical element of this competition is still, however, sort of a hard power military competition over the fate of Taiwan in the next 6 years. And I'm not sure we're taking that very seriously. And incredibly,
do you have a good answer on that one? Because I don't think I don't think voters would possibly support boots on the ground in Taiwan.
I agree with you.
So
and that's a failure.
What can we do?
Yeah, I think that's in part a failure of people like me and possibly you, in terms of explaining the importance. But I think you're right. Like, if the Chinese tomorrow invaded Taiwan, or just at least planted some facts on the ground, and we had a vote on an AUMF, I think we'd lose that vote on the House floor, almost certainly. So we have a lot of work to do. Okay, so how do we prevent that from happening? Because ours is a defensive strategy. It's a deterrent strategy. We want to avoid.
I think no matter what you do, no matter how convincing you've been over the last decade, if let's say we'd been convincing people how important that was, I still don't think you'd get there. So
which is
the
why,
question is, how do you prevent it?
But this is a critical distinction. You can't have a strategy that is based on deterrence by punishment, because that's going to fail, right? You can't say, oh, if you invade and plant some facts on the ground, we're going to punish you. We're going to potentially escalate all the way up to the nuclear level. Because I think both Xi Jinping and the American people think that's BS. We're not going to do that, right? Which is why you need a strategy of deterrence by denial. You need to field the capabilities that can actually prevent the invasion from happening, or at least degrade it significantly in real time.
I think I agree with that. That's extremely important. The Chinese would never put boots on the ground in Texas.
Yeah,
because everybody's armed. And they would just what I mean? So how do you make Taiwan that same kind of porcupine?
I did have on this podcast, I had what I called a Red Dawn Taiwan strategy, where it's like, how do you, and similarly in Wisconsin,
it's not crazy.
Every deer season, we become like the 8th largest army in the world, just based on the number of people that have deer hunting licenses.
But number 1 through 7 are all Texas counties.
That's right. It's like, good luck. Try it. Come on. So how do you do that? How do you turn Taiwan into a porcupine? So one of the opportunities we have available that doesn't involve, 5 years to build a super expensive ship, or like betting big on autonomous weapons that may never materialize. So, and one of the biggest things we've done in the 5 years that I've been in Congress is we got out of something called the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty. It was signed in 87 under Reagan, 87, 88. Check me on that. Your legion of fact checkers can check me on that. So this allows us to field all of these ground launch missiles with ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. That basically allows us to flip the script on what China's been doing to us for the last decade. Because the biggest thing China's done is build up their rocket force.
Right. And these are really serious missiles they have.
Totally.
Like ship killing, plane killing missiles.
And we're on the wrong side of the cost curve, right? Because it costs relatively nothing to field that missile, as opposed to a carrier, which now costs $13 billion. Right. So we can actually reverse that.
We have totally different goals. I mean, we're trying to power project, and they're just trying to defend a region.
Totally.
So, it's not fair. It's not a fair fight from the get-go.
Although we are trying to defend specific territory in this case. And it's hard. It's hard to do. They'd have to do some sort of amphibious landing in Taiwan. I mean, that's not an easy military task.
Yeah. You want to make the cost so high that, without American troops necessarily,
so
before you even get to that point.
Missiles are a key part of it. I think the Commandant of the Marine Corps has the right idea with trying to rotate these small teams of Marines throughout the first island chain, just really to kind of mess with the Chinese.
But have those Marines been through, like diversity and inclusion training.
I knew you were going somewhere with this.
Because if they haven't, I don't know how they could possibly beat the Chinese.
God, this is such a disaster. I mean,
we're
West,
crushing it. We're still getting emails on this stuff. There's been some more good ones. That's why we haven't sent the report yet. Because
you and Tom Cotton opened up this basic open forum for. Yeah, I've so I'm now the ranking member on the military personnel subcommittee. So this is front and center.
Okay,
and,
name dropper.
No big deal. I mean, I'm 250th in seniority in the House. You know, a lot of people need to die, and then I'm in charge. Yeah, it's a really huge deal. Yeah, it's like I did not mean to imply that I had power as a result of this, but just that it's at the forefront of our minds. And I'd be curious. I always think of this in terms of. It's going to sound stupid. Pull-up bars, right? So the Marine Corps, I was not, it may shock you, Dan, as you're staring across at the physical specimen in front of you right now. I was not a great athlete growing up. Yeah. I was all right at running. I played a little basketball. I was not good. I was not
You're a gazelle. You're running.
Yeah.
I'm not a runner.
So for me, the biggest challenge to getting in the Marine Corps, as stupid as it sounds, was doing pull-ups. The first time I got
upper body strength.
Yeah, I didn't lift. And that's why I need this book that encourages me to get stronger. Fortitude by Dan Crenshaw. Fortitude, published by 12, New York, available in bookstores everywhere. So I had to work my tail off for 2 years to go from 2 pull-ups to 16 pull-ups. So I went to the bare minimum you need to survive OCS is 16 pull-ups, and I did that. And then it took me another 2 years to work up to like 20, 22 pull-ups where I could get the max score on a PFT. And I was proud of that, right? For someone who was like a weak little, I couldn't do anything. And the beauty of that is there's all the Marine Corps cared about was whether I could do this thing. It wasn't, it was like the great equalizer, right? And that is essential.
It's kind of important.
To how the military operates, right? All that matters is can you get the job done? And I served in what were pretty diverse units downrange, and race was never an issue. It was never like a discussion at all. It was just, how do you get the job done? Can you do your job when the moment comes? Will you carry the radio when it's your turn to carry the radio? It's just, and this is a very destructive ideology. Bing West had a great article on this the other week. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts. I imagine they're somewhat similar, and particularly in the SEALs, where it's there's just no room for this stuff. No,
not at all. And it has seeped into the teams. I don't think I'm not as worried about our training.
Yeah.
Because this was a problem because they wanted to grow the force, not because they thought the force should be diverse or whatever, but because they wanted to grow it. There was talk about lowering the standards, and the SEAL teams had to justify why it did every single little thing. Why are you paddling for 12 hours in this boat on Thursday of Hell Week, and why haven't you let anybody sleep for 5 days? Why? What is the point of this? Why do you have to do 22 pull-ups? What is the point of that? It's because you have to climb a caving ladder to board a ship. You might have to climb a rope to get over a wall, and if you don't have upper body strength, and not just for your own body weight, but for the 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds of gear you might be carrying, then you're useless to the team and you need to go away. So we just make sure that you can handle that before we even send you to a team. It's very simple, right? Yeah. It's just a simple screening process. And so why do we torture people the way we do? And they did a great job just justifying that line by line. And so actually one of the things I did in this last session was ask for those standards and justifications from each special operations unit, in the Army, every branch, and so that if they ever try to change it, we have that in writing. We can go back to them. We can give it to you because you're a very important man on HASC, this personnel subcommittee, and you can say, "See, I told you. You see, this is why you have to do 22 pull-ups." The
Air Force is there was an article 2 weeks ago. The Air Force physical fitness test. Now allows you to choose. They're thinking about allowing you to choose whether you want to do the run or the walk or a row or a swim, I'm just not on board with that. There just needs to be a single high standard across the board. And then the GOFOs will say, the general officer, flag officer will be like, well, we want the military to look more like America does.
That's a terrible idea.
It's not true, right? Like, 70% of
what does that mean?
18 to 34-year-olds aren't even eligible to join the military, and we're in an all-volunteer force. Like, you want it to be elite, right?
Yeah, maybe the best of America.
That's right.
Maybe the most elite of America, and it should. And people aren't going to want to join if they feel like they're joining this like sort of wishy-washy JV team. Yeah, and we can't give that impression. And the pushback we've gotten from some of the Joint Chiefs and just leadership at DoD is, well, you're undermining our credibility. It's like, no, you did. Yeah. You undermined your credibility. We're reacting to it. And we're doing you a big favor here, so stop resisting it, first of all. Because I'm the bad guy here instead of you having to be the bad guy and the meanie against diversity and inclusion training.
But that's the issue, right? I mean, I think, and that's sort of the more pernicious aspect of this. And is this where we need to stipulate? Of course, we don't want any racism in the military. No one should be discriminated against because of color of skin.
But that's not what this is about.
No, I don't know if I'm maybe that exists in some units. It should be exterminated. I never saw it personally. Whatever. I mean, but I think a lot of our general officers and flag officers are just trying to appease the mob at this point.
And also there's an industry. I mean, the industry of diversity and inclusion. I mean, the military is paying money for this stuff. Like they are outsourcing training. And they have their gods. Like there's a whole like religious aspect to this. There's martyrs. And there's gods, there's priests. I mean, they're really, if you really think, like Ibram X. Kendi is a priest who gives you the gospel that you must recite, and like there's words you must recite, there's rules you must live by. Like this, diversity and inclusion is just an offshoot. It's the nice way to say critical race theory. Yeah, and it would be fine if you were just like teaching people about different backgrounds, okay? Because if like in the Navy, I don't know, maybe you're in a unit with a bunch of Filipinos. And so, because it's very normal, it's a very normal thing in the Navy. So maybe you should have a time when you get together and you learn about each other's cultures.
Sure.
So fine. That would be what I would think about as like diversity and inclusion training. But like, that's not what they do here.
Or just intellectual diversity, right? I'm all for people challenging like the mission. You can't challenge the mission, but like challenging the concept of operations, right? Like, okay, beat this up, red team it. Like, what am I missing? You know what I mean? Like, I imagine the SEAL teams was even way more collaborative and a flat structure than in the Marine Corps, right? Like, if that's the diversity we're talking about, okay. But then when the commanding officer says, "All right, we're moving out, we're crossing the line of departure," like, oh, sorry, I gotta edit that out. Sorry.
It's okay. We just bleep it.
Bleep it. Sorry.
I
used
how
the
red
F word.
You got.
My bad.
You're being such a wimp about it.
Confession.
Jeez.
Yeah, my bad. I don't know. Like podcasts.
Are you Catholic?
Weird. I am. Yes.
Yeah.
Are you? What are you? Are you?
I was married as a Catholic.
What does that mean?
Because my wife is Catholic and I do what my wife says.
That's a very Catholic sentiment.
Yeah. But I grew up in a Methodist church. Yeah.
Interesting. We don't need to go down that road. I forgot what I was saying, but
something about the military and diversity. Anyway, but the point is, we went off on a huge tangent there because of my one little joke. But we were talking about Taiwan. But okay. So I think we got. What else should we?
Let's just talk about Congress, Dan. Throw your agenda off the.
Okay. So no more foreign policy.
Yeah. I'd be curious. How much time do we have in this shindig?
Until we vote.
Good. We don't have votes.
When are votes?
Not till 8. All right, we got 3 more hours.
God, why are votes so late tonight?
Yeah. Okay. So when you came in 2018, is that right?
Wait. Yeah.
I remember this vividly because I met you at something, and I'm like, this guy seems awesome.
Yeah.
And
tell me how attracted to me you were, Mike.
I'm like, this guy seems great. And my team, I'm like, let's give him money. And my team was like, well, obviously he's not going to win. The establishment candidate has all the support. I'm like, really? I don't know. He seems pretty impressive.
Did you give me money?
I don't remember.
You did it.
Yeah. But like you bootstrapped this whole thing out of nowhere. And I think most people just like discounted you. And then you like built this whole thing, which is amazing. But I'd be curious, like, what are you've come into this institution. We've never been in the majority since you've come in. So it's like very different than when I came in 2 years prior. Like, what are your observations about like how Congress works and doesn't?
Well, I don't have the same like complaints. It's really popular to come up here and be like, this is so frustrating. Nobody gets anything done. And my thought has always been, it's not supposed to just get things done.
Yeah.
You know, that this is not the nature of Congress. It's supposed to be an unbelievably deliberative and difficult body to get things done.
It's not optimized for efficiency. Like that's a feature, not a bug of the system.
Yeah,
it's like hard.
Yeah, just like we should just kind of be happy about that. It shouldn't be. It's the reason that the Democrats haven't really passed much.
Yeah.
So we should maybe be a little bit grateful for the whole not getting things done stuff, because it actually works quite well. There has to be very broad consensus to get anything done. At least in even in the current state. So Democrats have control of all three bodies, but they barely have control of the Senate. So they just can't do a whole lot. And we had the same problem when you were in the majority. So it's kind of like a fake. It's like a fake majority in a way.
Yeah.
And everybody gets on your side, gets super frustrated that you're not getting the things done that they think you should get done. But it's also that same environment is what prevents the next guy from getting the things done. And then maybe, God forbid, we just get those things done at a local level, tailored to individual needs at certain communities, that maybe need it. Maybe we engage in some pilot programs, maybe some incremental policy making. It's like it's tough to get conservatives to understand that our rallying cry is, who said this? I didn't come up with it. It's like but it goes something like this. It's like, what do we want? Well, incremental change at a reasonable rate. When do we want it? In due time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there like an obvious though set of reforms that you think would help? I'll disclose my bias and then you can disagree. So
to Congress?
Yeah. I think you need power devolved from leadership down to the committees, because committees are where you can sort of get that incremental change and, a little bit of bipartisanship happening. I think the schedule is sort of absurd here. Like there could be a far more like rational way we fly in for a couple of weeks contiguously and then go home after that. You get more time in the district, more time here. I think the existence of the Appropriations Committee makes no sense, and you should sort of like devolve that authority into all the authorizing committees, and the distinction between the two makes no sense. And then I believe in some like more radical things like term limits and stuff like that. I'd just be curious. Or you just sort of view that? I
don't know if I disagree with any of that. Obviously, the devil's in the details on all of those things. It's not obvious to me that empowering a committee will necessarily drive a better outcome, but it's not obvious that it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Term limits, I'm in favor of term limits, but not because I think they'll do anything good for the country. I'm just in favor of them because everybody listening to this podcast wants them. Honestly. And I'm just honest with people about that. I'm honest every time I'm asked the question. And, because I can't find any good reasons. Because I'm like, here's how I talk to people about it. I'm like, look, do you want me gone? They're like, no, I like you. I'm like, I get it. But you don't like Nancy Pelosi, right? Like, you don't think she should have been there for 40 years. And they're like, exactly. And I'm like, do you think Nancy Pelosi is going to be replaced by some reasonable Democrat? Yeah. Or do you think she's going to be replaced by somebody to the left of AOC?
Yeah, all those center left Democrats in San Francisco.
I mean, I'm just like, fine, I support it. I'm not opposed to it. I'm not going to lie to anybody and say your problems will be solved by term limits. I think, I'd also think like the term limit push for 6 years is like. That's extreme. And
we landed on a 12-year construct.
I think 12 years is perfectly fine. Yeah. And, because 6 years like just completely empowers the deep state, the administrative state, and the staff state, let's call it, here in Congress. There's a lot of older members, these old boring members you've never heard of, who just will come up with some kind of history from a committee and from a bill from like 10 years ago. And it's like, nobody would have known that if you weren't here just that long.
Yeah.
And that's an important piece of information.
Yeah.
And, you need to have some members with some experience.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. There has to be some institutional knowledge. Also, we get reelected every 2 years. And there's some advantage to being an incumbent. There's also some disadvantage.
Totally.
Like a voting record that like people are mad about.
It used to be more of an advantage than I think it is.
I don't think it is as much anymore with social media and the way the grassroots movements can just topple people that we've seen in our own conference. So, and also just by the way, the quickest way to equalize the playing field would be to remove caps on donations.
Interesting.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Because it's impossible for anybody to compete with me monetarily and you. But what if you raise the individual cap to like $100,000? It would be easy now because like now like 10 donors could raise $1 million for a candidate they really liked. You see what I'm saying?
I hadn't thought about that.
Now, and so
I'm going to think of a counter argument in 5 minutes.
Yeah, but it's just so in Texas we don't have those limits
for a state
at the state level.
Interesting.
At the state level. So, and it's certainly not obvious that it empowers an incumbent or a challenger. Really, it's just the way it is. It's different, but it's not necessarily worse.
I do think though, and I don't fully understand what causes this, but it's undeniably true that the average cost of a campaign has gone up and up and up.
It's ridiculous,
inflation adjusted, and so I think correspondingly, the average amount of time your average member of Congress spends on fundraising has gone up, and so that's actually the more pernicious effect of money in politics. It's not like people are coming into your office with a bag of money saying, you need
right. That's an important point to tell people. People don't understand that. People think you're like owned by donors. It's just not true.
It's just a time cost. It's like you have to donate X number of your time to raising money for re-election, and that like naturally robs from the time you need to do
I think that's true. I think it depends
branch.
on the member. I don't feel like I spend a ton of time on that.
Well, you're probably able to raise a lot from small dollar donations online, right?
Yeah. We have a system
I can't
in
do
place.
that. Yeah.
Because no one likes you, or
everyone hates me. That's number one. That's like the main reason.
You're not good looking.
Yeah, I'm short. It's like a triple whammy, man. It's like my mom. She thinks I'm cool. Like other than that, my wife sometimes, but other than that, it's just a really.
It's not what they've said.
Yeah, really. you reached out to my mom. I knew it. Jackie, what are you doing?
She's so sweet, sweet Wisconsin woman.
She is an amazing. She's a saint. Jackie is a saint. I had another point on this that now I've lost in this conversation.
Wasting time on campaign finance.
Where did that
lead you?
The futility of congressional reform. I think it's not futile. You think it is.
No. I didn't say I disagree with any of the things you said. What was the last thing you said?
Okay, so we have this division between the authorizing committees and the appropriations committees.
That's an interesting one.
Dates back to the days of John Quincy Adams. It makes no sense because presumably the same skills you would need to be an effective authorizer are the same for an appropriator, right? You need to have knowledge of the executive.
It does seem like a weird extra step that we do.
Yeah. So just you want people that are paying attention to what that executive branch agency is doing.
Should we talk about the real elephant in the room?
What's that?
Earmarks.
Okay.
It's too dangerous of territory.
Congressionally directed spending.
Directed spending. Yeah. It's just gotten such a... here's such a reputation on our side, and maybe for good reason, because I think it was awful.
There were abuses
at some point,
undeniably.
But it's like the question is there a way to make it not awful? And why is it that the executive branch gets to direct this spending to individual projects in my district, and I don't? What the hell?
So that's the okay. So let's all just admit, there were abuses that needed to be addressed. So what happened with getting rid of
money
earmarks?
for beekeepers and whatever, just silly stuff.
Bridges to nowhere, right? So Congress took action, well-intentioned, but it had the unintended consequence of further empowering the executive branch. And I suspect this is the area where you and I agree the most, which is that the real story of Congress, or the modern Congress, is
giving up power
to the executive branch, right? The executive branch is sort of unusually powerful in the modern age. Particularly unelected members of the executive branch.
And that's who chooses where the money goes. When it comes down to like the really minute stuff, because project approval.
Totally.
Like I can't I can kind of advocate for project approval, especially for like the Army Corps of Engineers. But if it comes to like awarding something, like no way, you can't be involved in that. But the bureaucracy is, and maybe that's okay. I don't know. But the argument for earmarks, I'm not making it, just saying it, and it's not a bad one.
Yeah.
It's basically, look, we know how to direct this spending the best, and if you put really good safeguards on it, this is, like for me, those safeguards would have to be like, it really has to be used for infrastructure and only infrastructure. I think that what the Democrats have done in this session is put a lot more safeguards on it. I still don't think enough.
Yeah.
I think you can still give it to nonprofits and things. I'm not sure I like that.
But the point is, there's got to be a way to claw back that authority and not have it decided by unelected people in the executive branch,
right?
While still preventing the abuses that
you can
saw.
do both. I think you can accomplish both.
Yeah.
But earmarks have just gotten such a terrible reputation. And like honestly, I think a lot of the problems people have with Washington seems like they're always referencing a past abuse that isn't really relevant now, but it's really hard to have the conversation now. I'm trying to think of other examples where that would be true. Like lobbying, for instance. I think maybe that used to be much more corrupt. Now there's so many ridiculous rules on gifts, just all sorts of things. It's just, it used to be the Wild West. Now it's just not. And I don't think they have this power that people think they have.
That's true.
And it's just, people just don't realize that. People also think we get retirement for life, which is also just not true.
Very not true. Do you agree with my sort of schedule thing? Because it strikes me that
what was your schedule thing?
Okay, so I mean,
just be here more or less.
Well, look, more. I think.
Okay.
But okay, we fly in on Monday, we fly out on a Thursday. It's crazy. There's no time. People are fundraising all the time. I mean, it strikes me like you and I think.
I agree with that. It needs to be like blocked. It doesn't have to be more time, but how about we just put all the time at once?
Yeah.
So that we're just like there.
Better time, quality.
Like we're just here. Yeah, I agree with that.
Because this is probably the longest conversation we've had, and like we're friends, we're friendly. We talk on the House floor a lot. Part of that's my fault. You've invited me to concerts, and I've been like, my bedtime's 9:30. I can't go. I can't go out.
Yeah,
so
you're a nerd.
But there's just you gotta get to know people to like get anything done in Congress, and maybe getting things done is not what you want to optimize around. But I don't know. It's just
conversations would be good. There's a happy medium of the getting things done.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
Again, it's not as easy as people think it is.
Or at least just having a debate. Like my dream is to walk onto the House floor and to witness an actual debate happening, which I have not seen in my 5 years in Congress. I've seen people reading talking points. I've seen people yelling at each other. I've seen something approximating a debate.
I've seen it
during the government shutdown because no one had anywhere else to be, and everyone was actually on the floor. But it's very rare.
And I guess I think I've seen what I think approximated debate. Especially when we had motions to recommit, and there was like argument, counter arguments. That's a debate.
Yeah.
But maybe the definition of a debate should be somebody could actually be persuaded.
Yeah.
And like that's maybe what you're referring to. Like there's no, each side is simply making the arguments, and they're not willing to be persuaded. And I don't know if there's anything wrong with that, to be perfectly honest. It just might just be the way it is.
Yeah.
But it also depends on the issue. There are it's rare, but there are votes where people are like figuring it out at the moment.
For sure.
Because it's just that I'm just that unsure about it. It has happened a couple times.
For sure.
So, it's just rare. It doesn't mean, I don't know if that means there's anything wrong with the system per se.
We didn't cover anything on your list here. I apologize. But
Yeah, we got China.
China,
there's cybersecurity.
Nerds.
I don't know if people are that interested in some of this stuff. I think they're probably a little bit more interested on the inside baseball
of Congress. Yeah, I wish I had like
a lot of
juicy,
this stuff I've already talked about.
Salacious story that we could tell the times we went to the White House together.
Yeah, we do have a White House story, but it's not salacious.
No, we
it's just
what were the details? Trump was going to precipitously pull everybody out of Syria.
Right. And we were like, you shouldn't do this.
We thought that was a bad idea. That gets to the whole Iraq and Afghanistan withdrawal. My view is that we've, through a process of very costly trial and error, we've arrived at a sustainable posture, which is you have a small investment of special operators and regular forces that work by with and through local allies, and you're able to actually do a lot for like a modest investment of U.S. resources.
Yeah, you and I are in the same outlook on that, and we lost the debate. I mean, look at what we're doing right now. And we're quickly moving into a situation in Afghanistan that looks just like it did pre 9/11.
Yeah.
And I hope nothing bad happens. It's a little frustrating, and it's almost insulting to have the deadline be September 11th.
Totally insulting.
To be honest, at the 20-year mark, like, who are you saving? I'm so tired of people moralizing over it, like they're saving like us poor soldiers that didn't understand what we were getting into. That part really pisses me off.
I wanted to ask you about this because that's like we got to bring the troops home. Well, I wasn't
like there are little babies.
I wasn't a SEAL.
It's like, let me tell you what these guys are like.
When
you're not your little babies.
When I was like 23 and like a second lieutenant, like
you were probably a babe.
I was total baby.
Little babe. You couldn't even do pull-ups.
I just like measly.
Couldn't even keep your head up because your neck is so weak. You're just like little baby.
Just like someone cradle me. This
is really devolving.
Like the last place I wanted to be was in garrison, like doing PowerPoint slides. Like I wanted to.
Yeah, everybody wants.
Now I'm not saying like we casually deploy.
Yeah, you don't want to have your time wasted. You don't want to lose your legs for no reason. But like, you didn't sign up to do nothing. So stop feeling bad for us. And also people are like, well, what did you get out of it? What did you get out of 20 years? I'm like, no more 9/11s.
Yeah.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
Frankly, because there's like tens of thousands of those people that want to kill us and would love to commit another 9/11.
Yeah.
If they could get the resources and planets and just like have some time to breathe. Also, but we haven't given them that time to breathe.
Like when I joined the military, I didn't do it. In fact, I thought like the invasion of Iraq was a bad idea at the time. I didn't do it to achieve some greater geopolitical objective. I did it like that was not my role as a person who's lowest on the totem pole. Like I did it to serve my country. I did it to pay back a debt I felt I owed to my community. I did it because I wanted to test myself selfishly. I did it because I wanted the test specifically of I didn't know anywhere else where as a 21-year-old graduate of college I could have that much responsibility and really see what I was made of, and then just some
there's a complicated sense of
adventure that I just like I just want to go out and run around and see what I'm made of. It's like it's not like I was like I'm joining the Marine Corps because I feel like having a non-Saddam democratic Iraq is so important that I must be in that.
I think that's an important point that people don't understand. There's definitely a lot of people that I think went to Iraq and served there for those exact reasons and were like openly against the war.
Yeah.
So I think that's a pretty interesting point to make. And I had another point to make, but I lost it.
Yeah.
But that was a really good
Fortitude, Dan Crenshaw, American Resilience in the Age of Outrage, available wherever books are sold. How do we wrap this up? Can we talk about lowbrow stuff?
What was I going to say? Lowbrow stuff?
Yeah, what do you do for fun?
This is how you got into trouble on Jonah's podcast.
Jonah got into trouble on this podcast, not me. I held it together. Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good. What did he say? Or did he even publish it?
He put it out there. Yeah, it was all good. Yeah.
He's not elected.
We talked about half-baked ideas. So I have a lot of half-baked ideas that are not quite ready for prime time. They're not fully baked.
Well, this is a policy podcast first and foremost. So
I can pull up.
When you're half-baked ideas and you can pull it up on your little iPhone 5 there. Just kind of weird that you have one of those.
Very old. File of half-baked ideas.
Wow. That's weird.
Yeah, so one of them is... airport bars if you're not flying, because airport bars are an interesting place. The airport should just have their bars open 24/7.
You think it would gain
people?
You think that would get people though?
Yeah, they just get a customer base. Yeah, just they could be at 6 a.m. Where else can you drink a beer at 6 a.m.?
There's a lot of guys with like their kind of ties hung low, like their top button unbuttoned.
My brother-in-law said that. On the subject of term limits, there should be term limits for drug kingpins, because part of the problem, and I know you're big into, Mexico, South America, Central America. Part of the problem is they get, there's rivalries within the drug cartels, and, if there were term limits, there wouldn't be as much violence and turnover.
Well, how do you enforce the term limit? Do you kill them?
I don't know.
I think they do enforce term limits in drug cartels. I think they murder people.
Dan, listen, I'm not the details guy.
I'm
okay?
not the
I let you
details.
nerds.
Yeah, we're the nerds.
The space lasers will take care of the term.
Yeah. So we got a couple hours before we go back to votes. You're gonna read your sci-fi novel?
I might. I don't know. Yeah, I'm sure I have work to do. I got to record some videos for my team so I can really play to my audience of 1,000 followers as opposed to your 100,000 or 1 million. So
I have a lot more than 1 million.
Oh wow, look at that.
I mean, not on the podcast. I don't know how many. It's hard to tell on a podcast.
Could I survive buds?
No.
I can't swim. That's my problem.
That's a big part of it.
Yeah. I mean, I can swim, but I can't swim well. That would be a critical vulnerability for me.
You got to swim like 2 miles at a
That's
time.
a lot.
Like in
That's
under,
a lot.
I actually totally forgot the time. 60 or 70 minutes.
Who has more followers, you or Jocko Willink?
Me.
Oh, okay. I don't know. There's some disagreement among your staff here. Who would win in a fight? Jocko.
Look it up.
Jocko would kick your.
Jocko would win.
Yeah.
He's a monster.
Total monster.
I mean, he's a jiu-jitsu double, triple black belt.
Triple black belt.
Times 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's a thing.
I love that guy.
He's fun.
Yeah.
No, he's great. He was making fun of me because I have little dogs, right? Like cute little dogs, the cutest little dogs. And they're like a little long-haired dachshund, kind of poodle Pomeranian mix. They're just like adorable. They pal around. They're brother and sister from the same litter. And he's got this like big German Shepherd, typical Jocko dog. And he was like making fun of my dogs. And I was like, yeah, well, you need a big dog to protect you. Just that's for the audience. Okay. If somebody's ever making fun of you for your little foo-foo dog, that's the comeback.
I have a theory. And
I protect my dogs. You need protection from a dog.
I don't know, Jocko, but like no one could be that hardcore all the time.
He's kind of that hardcore.
I have a feeling he has like one sort of secret thing. I don't know what it is, but like.
Yeah, like a little vice.
Yeah, just one thing that he never admits. That's just like my working theory on the whole
I've
thing.
tried.
Yeah.
I've tried to get it out of him. I've tried to discover it. It's hard. He's just. I mean, he's put me through training. It's like I just never
Did you go
saw
through
it.
the schoolhouse when he was the OIC?
Yeah, he was the
school?
OIC at Trade and
Wow.
it was rough.
Wow.
it was rough because it was just like, we're going to make, I'm just doing Jocko voice, we're going to make you go through the worst situation of your possible every single exercise. And it's like, so just everybody dies and you're just like dragging guys off the battlefield.
The other funny thing was his co-host, I forget his name, like has a much like higher
Charles.
Yeah, Echo Charles, like a much higher, like less sort of Jocko voice. And so you think listening to it, he's sort of like, but he's like jacked out of his mind. Like he's a huge dude.
Echo
Like,
Charles. Yeah. He's another black belt jiu-jitsu times 10 kind of guy.
Totally funny.
Yeah.
So,
It's a good time.
and you were a San Diego SEAL, or you were
San Diego. Yeah. 10
cool.
years there.
Damn, man. Well, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Mike Gallagher, everybody.